bienvenidos todos a las raíces comunes, Asamblea Pública de las Raíces Comunes del Fideicomiso de Vivienda. Vamos a hablar acerca de la implementación de la vivienda. Es para implementar el Fideicomiso de Vivienda y va a ser el primero en nuestra región y va a desarrollar viviendas y crear casas para que la gente pueda vivir en ellas, comprarlas. Gracias por unírsenos esta noche, es importante.
And I'm pleased to be moderating our conversation tonight. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce Inez Vargas and Ruth Medina, who will be providing live Spanish interpretation tonight. In order to facilitate their work, I and the other presenters will try to speak slowly this evening. If you would like to listen to the Spanish interpretation, click Interpretation at the bottom of your screen. It has a globe icon. Then click Spanish, and then click Mute Original Audio. Inez will now provide those instructions for us in Spanish. Thank you, Inez.
Buenas noches a todos. Si ustedes desean escuchar esta presentación en español, ustedes tienen que hacer lo siguiente. En la parte inferior de su pantalla, busque el icono que tiene el mundo. Haga entonces clic en la palabra que dice Spanish y luego haga clic en la frase que dice Mute Original Audio. De esa manera ustedes van a poder escucharlo todo en español. Gracias.
Okay, thank you to Inez and Ruth for providing Spanish interpretation of tonight's conversation. Tonight's town hall will be recorded so that folks who are unable to attend will also be able to learn about common roots. Because community land trusts are new to our region, we'll hear from several speakers tonight about what they are and about how common roots will provide permanently affordable homes. So first, we'll hear from Julie Brenner, who will explain how community land trusts work and what this will look like here in Walla Walla. Then we'll hear from Nadine Pulfer, who will explain the origins of common roots. And we will also hear from several community leaders about our regional affordable housing challenges and why we need a community land trust here. After we hear from all of our speakers, there will be time for questions. So, as questions arise, please feel free to type them into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. We will answer as many as we can, including questions that were submitted during the registration process. So, our first speaker tonight is Julie Brenner. Julie has over 25 years of experience with community land trust and affordable housing development, planning and community development, organizational capacity building, and neighborhood revitalization. Since 2002, Julie has worked as a housing consultant, specializing in community land trusts, while also serving as the housing director for Opal Community Land Trust on Orcas Island. As Opal's housing director, Julie has worked on multiple housing development projects, creating permanently affordable owner-occupied housing, as well as rental units. And she is responsible for policy development and lender relations. In her capacity as a consultant, Julie's work focuses on community land trusts and home ownership, both regionally and nationally, and she is recognized as a national expert.
So, hello everybody. I'm going to take just a second to get my screen up for you. Thank you, Lily, for that introduction. I don't think I need to say anything more, except for I'm delighted to be here with you all. It's nice to be invited, and I'm always excited to see a new community in Washington who's interested in expanding the world of community land trusts in the Northwest here. We're lucky to live in a state that has a lot of community land trust neighbors, and we're always happy to sort of share what we've learned so that hopefully there's fewer mistakes each time around. So I'm going to take the next few minutes to go over a couple things. I've been asked to look at or review the housing needs assessment that was, I think it's in draft form at this point, recently conducted, to see what the highlights are and bring those to the conversation this evening. And then I'll go into a little bit more detail about what a community land trust is and how in particular it could help meet the housing needs in the Walla Walla region. So first I'll start with the housing needs assessment highlights. I'm going to go through numbers. I'm kind of a numbers person, so I'll do my best to be slow and metered when I talk about numbers. But I'm known for my spreadsheets and for my data, so I will trust you guys to alert me if I need to slow down. So the region that Common Roots is hoping to address includes both Washington and Oregon, but the housing needs assessment that we're going to talk about this evening was funded by the Washington Department of Commerce and the Housing Trust Fund. So it's limited in focus to the Washington side of that map. And specifically, it takes into account Walla Walla, College Place, Dayton, and Waitsburg, and is looking at the area that includes about 48,000 people and just under 20,000 housing units. So I went through the report, or the draft report at this point, I guess, and tried to look at the things that would help sort of inform what you all need and how you might move forward in your effort to create permanently affordable homeownership opportunities in your region. So first was the housing inventory. So you can see it's been slowly growing over the past 30 years. The net increase is just over 19,000, or the net number of units is just over 19,000. And the increase in the past 10 years has been relatively slow, with just about 0.5% to 1% a year, not keeping pace with the growth in population. And that's resulted in a tightening of the housing market. So you all are experiencing dramatically low vacancy rates across the region. This graph shows Walla Walla County, College Place, Dayton, Waitsburg, and the city of Walla Walla. And the dark bars represent the owner-occupied housing vacancy rates, and then the light green bars represent the rental housing vacancy rates. And you can see, with the exception of Waitsburg, there's virtually no vacancy. Everything's below 2%. And a healthy rental vacancy rate where people can reasonably find housing is between 5% and 7%. And you all are hovering in College Place at 0, in Walla Walla, the city, it was 2%, 2.1, Walla Walla County, 1.9. So that's a really, really tight market and results in upward pressures on pricing, of course. So that's why you're seeing rents go up and up. Likewise, the homeownership vacancy rate, a healthy rate, is considered 2%. And with the exception of Waitsburg, you're well below 2% in all those markets, which means higher pressure on housing prices. So you all, the national owner occupancy rate for the United States is about 67%. So Dayton and College Place both show pretty robust homeownership rates, but Waitsburg and Walla Walla are substantially below what the national average is. So that suggests that you want to include homeownership in your discussion when you're talking about housing needs. And then the median sale price has been going up and up. The dark green bars represent Walla Walla County, and the light green bars represent Columbia County from 2013 to 2020. The June of 2020, the median sale price in Walla Walla County was $273, and in Columbia County was $208. And in the third quarter of 2020, that Walla Walla figure had gone from 273 up to 301,000. So it's going up, and it's going up steeper and faster in recent months than it has historically. So median rents, this is sort of an interesting graph to me. The two lines, the upper line originally represented the top tier rental units. So that's the price of rents for sort of nicer or larger units. And then the lower line on the left-hand side of the graph represents the bottom tier rents for, say, smaller or not as nice units. But you can see from 2016 on, those lines are parallel. And in some cases, the lower tier things are renting for higher rents than the nicer units. So I think that that's a function of the pressure, the zero vacancy rates, essentially. So it doesn't matter what you're renting, you're going to pay a lot for it. And there's very little distinction in cost between size and quality of unit anymore because there's so much pressure on your housing stock. So people are considered severely cost burdened in terms of what they spend on housing if they spend more than 50% of their gross monthly income on their rent or their house payment. This graph shows households in your region who are severely cost burdened in terms of renting. So they pay more than 50% of their gross income towards their rent, which means it's substantially more than 50% of their net income or their take-home pay. So Washington statewide, less than 18% of households are severely cost burdened. But in all of your communities, with the exception of Dayton, you exceed that. So Walla Walla City has almost a quarter of its renter households are paying more than 50% of their income towards rent, which is, of course, very, very hard to sustain. So the United Way wanted to come up with a better measure than just income to look at sort of when people were economically distressed, because of course it's not just about your income, but it's about where you spend your money or how you are able to spend your money. So in addition to income, they wanted to also look at the cost side of the picture. So they took into account things like healthcare and daycare and transportation. And if you're an Alice household, it's an economically distressed household. So statewide, about a third of the households within the state meet that threshold of being economically distressed. And you can see across your region substantially higher numbers, from 42 up to 50%, up to half of the households in College Place are considered economically distressed. And the percentage of Alice households as a function of the overall households in your region has been growing, not shrinking. So people are becoming more and more distressed, not less. So the conclusions of the draft housing needs assessment so far is that there were several of them that sort of stuck out. One is that there's a missing middle housing that's needed. So this is sort of considered that the lower end of the middle income and the upper end of the lower income threshold. You all need to have more housing that's close to your jobs. There were longer commutes noted. There's a need for new construction to help alleviate some of the pressure on your low vacancy rates. So it's not enough just to lower the cost of things, but you actually need more units on the ground in your community in order to address housing needs. There's the projected future need for housing is almost 2,700 units for households earning between 50% of area median income and 120% of area median income. So that's sort of that missing middle segment. And what that means in real terms, in terms of incomes, is people earning between $28,000 a year and $67,000 a year. So that's sort of the band of households that are in the most need and that Common Roots might try to target. And then an affordable house payment for folks in that range of $28,000 to $67,000 is $700 a month to $1,700 a month. And then finally, there was a recommendation to start a community land trust that came out of another affordable housing report and was also noted in the Walla Walla County 5-year plan. So Common Roots has come from that first recommendation and now has this overlay of the housing needs assessment and is poised to sort of move forward with the next step of implementation. So now I'm going to shift gears and talk more specifically about what a community land trust is. So when we're in the community land trust world, we talk a lot about the housing affordability gap. So what I mean by that is, what's the difference between what low or moderate income buyers can afford and what does it cost to buy or build a unit in your community? So when I crunch the numbers and I look at those households earning between 50% of AMI and up, and I think that number was in the $28,000, $29,000 a year range. So those folks can afford houses between $140,000 and $230,000 a year, but it costs between $285 to $300 and up to purchase or build a home in your community. So clearly there's a large gap between what people can actually afford and what's available to purchase. But if we were just talking about affordability, we would limit our conversation likely to rental housing. But in fact, community land trusts also address the wealth gap. There's a large difference in the ability to accumulate wealth in this country between people who own their home and people who rent their home. So you can see the red line across the bottom is the average net wealth of a renter household, and the blue line across the top is the average net wealth of a homeowner household. And this is from 2010 to 2016. And you can see that homeowner households, first of all, have a lot more wealth. And second of all, that wealth grows over time. But renter households actually lost wealth during that same time frame. So when we're talking about community land trusts, we're talking about affordable housing that we make affordable and we keep affordable over time. We create an opportunity for households to build wealth over time, which is sort of that transformational wealth opportunity that many folks in our communities are left out of. The reality is in the United States, our homes are the #1 vehicle for wealth creation for most of our families. So we want to help people get into that. It also is a great tool for helping revitalize communities or neighborhoods within communities without displacing the residents who live there. And as the resources, as housing becomes more and more expensive, we have to put more and more resources in it in order to make it affordable. And at the same time, there's less and less of these resources available overall. So we want to make sure that we protect the limited resources that we're able to invest to create affordable housing in the first place. So community land trusts are nonprofit organizations. They are community-based. They make homes that are affordable and they keep them affordable forever. And we also have a large emphasis on stewardship. I like to say 99 years is a very long time, and that's the duration of our commitment. That's actually the beginning of our commitment. So we have a strong emphasis on stewardship, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a little bit. So in terms of governance, community land trusts are a little bit different than some nonprofits in that a third of our board of directors is made up of our homeowners, people who actually own our homes. And then the other 2/3 can be different segments of the community depending on how the bylaws are drafted. But it's important that we have our homeowners' voice on our board. And we don't want our homeowners to have a controlling interest, but we want them to have a substantial interest. So the tripartite board was sort of born out of that, that desire to kind of balance interests. We're also often membership organizations, and our board is elected by our membership. And that's important because as you create long-term affordable units in your community over time, your board of directors is responsible for stewarding a lot of assets over time. I live on Orcas Island. It's a very hot market. It's a very expensive place to live. And so we actually own the land that's worth millions and millions of dollars under hundreds of people's homes. So it's important that we have the broader community's interests in mind at all times. So our board is elected by our membership, and that helps protect the long-term community focus and helps us be better stewards of those assets over time. So the way the homeownership structure works with a community land trust is we actually separate the title to a home so that the homeowner buys the house and the community land trust maintains ownership of the land underneath that house. And then the homeowner enters into a 99-year lease with that community land trust to have sole and exclusive use of that land while they own their home on top of it. And it's important we'll get into a little bit of the detail, but but it's an important long-term commitment between the community land trust and the homeowner. The lease is balanced. It's not meant to represent the landlord like most leases are, but rather to balance the interests between the community that's investing money into this home and the homeowner that's actually buying the home. And then the lease can be inherited, which is always important. I think one of the big benefits of home ownership is that it provides secure housing, and it's an asset that you can pass on to your heirs. So when somebody dies in a community land trust home, their home can be left to their children, and their children can inherit that lease along with the house. So as I said, the ground lease conveys exclusive and sole rights to the land to the homeowner. One of the biggest restriction that exists in the ground lease is that it restricts the price for which the home can be sold in the future. That's how we maintain the affordability over time. But it also defines the responsibilities of the homeowner, the community land trust, and the lender. We need to make sure that our documents are created in such a way that that conventional lenders will be willing and able to loan on our homes, or else we wouldn't be successful. And the lease is the vehicle for that. So when we talk about ongoing affordability, it's really this idea that in exchange for buying a house at a below market price, the seller agrees to limit the price at which they can sell that home in the future. So when I went to my first resale, I was really quite nervous. I thought this was a great idea. I thought community land trusts were brilliant. I liked the sort of way you invest once and you help family after family, but I was a little bit nervous about how the families themselves might feel about this. And I went to our first resale and I was delighted. And what I found, 60 and 70 resales later, is that 99.9% of the time, the folks who live in our homes are delighted to pass that opportunity to somebody who is in the same position that they were in when they purchased their home. So when we talk about that original below market price, we need to make sure that these homes are affordable to begin with. So we kind of go back to that affordability gap. And we do some math to figure out what really can low to moderate income people in our community afford, and what really does it cost to build and sell those homes. And we sell the homes for not what they cost, but what people can afford. And then once we have that lower initial price that we've sold the home to somebody for, we have the resale restriction that exists in the ground lease, so that they get that lower price at resale, and then that lower price is perpetuated again and again and again each time that home is sold to a new low to moderate income family who's eligible. And as I said, there's a large emphasis on stewardship of community land trusts. We talk about the stewardship of our homeowners. We do a lot of pre-purchase stewardship, and that starts with pricing the homes initially to the right price point, but also home buyer education and those sorts of things. But it doesn't stop when somebody buys their home. We provide post-purchase support and stewardship for our homeowners. And during the foreclosure crisis, community, there was nationwide, community land trusts had a fraction of the default to foreclosures that the rest of the market suffered. So even though we serve a more marginal population and people with lower incomes, we saw more success of our homeowners during that economic downturn by, I want to say it was a tenth as many as market rate homeowners. We also emphasize stewardship of our homes. If we build a crappy home, we're stuck selling it over and over and over again. So we have a strong incentive to build quality homes. And because we're thinking in the 100 or 200 year timeframes, we're willing to invest in quality, durable products that your average builder doesn't necessarily invest in. Also energy efficiency kinds of related things too, because we know that our homeowners are going to benefit for that in the long run. And then we also talk about stewardship of the organization itself, because if we're committing to 99 years to our homeowners, we need to make sure that the organization that owns the land underneath these homes has a long-term vision and is designed to be a long-term sustainable organization as well. So when I'm talking about community land trusts and community land trust homes, I always feel like it's important to provide some visuals, because people have all kinds of preconceived notions about what these homes may or may not look like. And I think one thing that's important to recognize is that they look different in each community, and it's up to you all what your community land trust homes look like. So I wanted to give you a few snapshots from across the state. These were straw bale homes that were built on Lopez Community Land Trust in a net zero neighborhood. Lopez is the island just next to Orcas. These are also little apartments that they built along with their office building. San Juan Community Home Trust, which is a CLT on San Juan Island, they've done a neighborhood like sort of around a courtyard with duplexes, and then they also did modular single family construction in another neighborhood. Opal Community Land Trust, we have 110 single family owner occupied homes on the island. This is one of them. So they look different and they're in different places. And we also have 75 rental homes on our island now, some of which we acquired, like this neighborhood was an expiring affordable community that the affordability covenants were expiring. So we went in, we purchased it, we renovated it, and now we have additional affordable rentals. Colshan Community Land Trust in Bellingham has focused largely on a scattered site acquisition approach, but then they did this new construction project as well. And there's Homestead Community Land Trust in Seattle, which has sort of the most urban image of all the CLTs in the state so far. And their portfolio includes single family homes and condominiums. So community land trusts are an incredibly flexible tool. There can be various housing types like single family, multifamily, duplexes, condos. There can be different housing tenures. Lopez Community Land Trust has cooperative housing on top of their CLT owned land, single family, and as I said, condos. And then there's a large emphasis on stewardship, everything from the houses to the land to the people to the ongoing affordability associated with our homes. And then we try to emphasize and always be good partners with other agencies because we recognize there's a lot of good work happening in our communities, and we don't need to do it all. So for example, if you've got a strong housing counseling agency in your community, you might partner with that organization to handle the housing counseling for the folks who buy your community land trust homes. So now I'm going to take a minute and talk about common roots, the potential for common roots in the Walla Walla region and how the community land trust might look more specifically in your neighborhood. So I did a little bit of number crunching to look at what Walla Walla's affordability gap really is. So a household of 4 earning 100% of median income, so that means that it's $69,900. So half of the households in the region or in the county earn more than that, and half earn less than that. So it's a good middle number. So a household of 4 at 100% of median earns just under $70,000 a year. So an affordable payment for that particular household, according to sort of industry standards, would be $1,750 a month, which translates into an affordable mortgage, if you can get a mortgage at 4%, of $295,000. So we said earlier that the median sale price was about $300 in Walla Walla. So there's not a huge mismatch there between the household earning median income and a median sale price of a home. But if we look at households earning 80% of median income in Walla Walla, they would earn just under $56,000, and they could afford a monthly rent or house payment of $1,400 a month, which translates into a mortgage of $230,000 a year. And a household of 4 earning 60% of AMI earns just under $42,000 a year, can afford a monthly payment of just over $1,000 for their home, and they would qualify for a mortgage of only $170,000. So the problem comes when we look at the inventory of what's available in the region. So as I said, the median sale price in Walla Walla County in the third quarter of 2020 was just over $300,000. So that means half of the houses that sold for more than that, and half of the houses that sold for less than that. So it'd be nice if you could, find some houses sort of in the range for the households that we just looked at. But when I did a search of homes for sale in Walla Walla last week, there were 25 single family homes for sale, but only 4 of those were for sale at less than $295,000. which is what our 100% of median household could afford. And there was only one that was for sale at less than $275,000 on that particular day. So you can see it's a very, very tight housing market, and it's not affordable to households earning 60 to 80% of area median income, and certainly not below that. The draft housing needs assessment also called out a need for 600 new units to serve families between 50 and 80% of median income. So that's sort of 80% is often one of the thresholds that groups focus on, because most of the public funders limit their funding to households earning less than 80%. Many of us also try to secure private funding so that we can serve folks over that threshold, but certainly that 50 to 80% band has a high need and not a lot of resources, and some public resources, but not a lot of personal resources that will make them successful in home ownership. So I also like to look at sort of what jobs look like that end up in that band of 50 to 80% or 60 to 80% of area median income. So a service worker who might earn $14 an hour, if they work full-time year-round, they would earn just over $29,000 a year. So you can really think of anybody who's earning sort of in that minimum wage category. So that family or household or person could afford a monthly rent of $728 a month, or a mortgage payment of $728 a month. And when we talk about mortgage payments, we are including in that number the payment to the bank, as well as a little bit for taxes and for insurance each month. So they would only qualify for a mortgage of $115,000, but USDA makes loans available in rural areas at a subsidized interest rate. So if this person or this household was able to get their mortgage through USDA's 502 Direct program, they could borrow up to $180,000 through that lending product. So likewise, small business owners, when we convene meetings about, who are we going to serve, there's often a lot of talk about workforce housing. Everybody in all of these scenarios, we're serving folks who work in our local communities. But there's also a tendency, I think, for people in these different industries to assume that this housing isn't for them because they're not low income. But really, people earn in all different sectors end up qualifying for our housing. So the small business owner whose self-employment net income is $35,000 a year can afford a monthly payment of $875 a month, which would get them $140,000 in a conventional mortgage or $234,000 from USDA. Folks in healthcare, nurses, nursing assistants, even probably some of your maybe research assistants at the colleges, that kind of thing, $17 an hour full-time comes to a $35,000 a year income, which is an affordable monthly payment just under $900 a month. And that translates into a $140,000 conventional mortgage or a $234,000 USDA mortgage. And my final example is somebody who maybe works for the city or the county. They earn $42,000 a year. They can afford just over $1,000 in a mortgage payment, and they can qualify for a conventional mortgage of $172,000, but they may be income eligible for USDA now. So again, when we talk about that below market price, I wanted to go through the specifics of an example in Walla Walla. So how would we price one of these common roots affordable community land trust homes in your community? And then what might the resale look like of such a home in your community down the road? So one of the myths I like to dispel right out of the gate is that community land trusts, the difference between what we sell our houses for is not related to the value of the land, even though that's technically we are not selling the land, but really we emphasize the affordability gap. So we want to price our homes for what's affordable to people in our target income. And that is very unlikely to be equal to the value of the land. And on any given day, two appraisers, two assessors are going to assign different values to that land anyway. So rather than trying to parse apart what's the value of the land versus what's the value of the building and end up with prices that may or may not meet our target household's needs, we kind of flip it over and we look at what those families can afford, and then we sell those homes to them at those prices. So when I did that analysis in Walla Walla, I was looking at a household of 4 earning 60% of AMI, so that was just under $42,000 a year. So an affordable monthly payment for that household would be $1,150, and that translates into an affordable price at $158,000. So that assuming that people use cash for their closing costs, we would sell them a home for $158,000, and they would get a mortgage for $158,000. So if it costs us $285,000 to either purchase that home or to build that home, we'd have to come up with $127,000 of subsidy in order to sell that home to that family for $158,000. And I know that sounds like a lot of money, and it is a lot of money. And that's why we protect it and make it a long-term investment. But I also want to point out that if you were trying to do rental housing in your community at an affordable rate, at a subsidized rate, it would cost you more than $127,000 a unit to create rental housing. So it tends to take less subsidy to create a unit of owner-occupied resale restricted housing than a unit of affordable rental housing. So now I want to look at the ongoing affordability. So as I said, we've created this affordable price of $158,000. And then I mentioned earlier that our lease has a resale restriction in it. So there's actually a math formula in that ground lease that will determine what people can sell that home for in the future. Most of the community land trusts in the Pacific Northwest and Washington, a little bit over into Montana, have a resale formula that's called a fixed rate formula. Now there's all different kinds of formulas, and you'd want to do a real analysis of the economics in your community before you decide on one. But I decided to use the fixed rate formula for my example because it's pretty common in Washington state. So the way that works is you would take that original affordable price that you paid when you bought your home, $158,000, and that number would increase by 1.5% each year you owned your home. So in my example here, I'm pretending that you owned your home for 10 years, and after 10 years, you're going to sell it for $181,700. So in the last 5 years, prices in Walla Walla have increased by 62%, but this CLT home only increased by 15% over 10 years. So that's a considerable difference. Now, we also want to make sure that the seller is actually walking away with something. As we said earlier, we want to make sure that there is some wealth creation. So that seller is selling their house for $181,000. They're going to pay closing costs to sell. They're going to pay off their mortgage, their $158,000 mortgage, and they're going to walk away with $48,000 after selling their home that they lived in with an affordable payment for 10 years. And their alternative would have been continuing to rent and not having anything at the end of 10 years to show for it. So housing affordability with the community land trust is preserved. It only goes up at, in this example, 1.5% a year. Homeowners are able to create wealth. The public and the private investments are protected. Our homeowners are successful. Your community ends up with quality homes at affordable prices. Local residents can buy those homes. Folks can live where they work, and we make sure that people get into safe and secure mortgage financing so that they're successful in the long run. So I'm going to pass the baton back to Lily to let us know who's up next. So thank you so much, and I look forward to answering some questions.
Thank you so much, Julie, for your presentation and your expertise. That was really clear. For audience members, if you have a question for Julie, you can type it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. And as I said, questions will be answered after we. So, on the Affordable Housing Implementation Task Force Subcommittee that's working to establish Common Roots Housing Trust. on Community Council's 2018-2019 Affordable Housing Study Committee and was on the Walla Walla County Council on Housing's Community Land Trust Task Force in 2019. So over to you, Nadine.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank Julie Brunner for that wonderful presentation. I hope that clarified a lot of the questions that people have and why it was reasonable for us to consider a community land trust for our community. I'd like to share with you all how the Common Roots Housing Trust came into being, how something that appears to be so delightfully simple for one of our community's biggest problems came to fruition. The task force has been studying and developing plans for Common Roots Housing Trust. It was a result of quite a bit of hard work and dedication by community members, all working towards a common goal of increasing affordable housing in Columbia and Walla Walla counties and then the Milton-Freewater area. The genesis of this project started with Community Council's study of affordable housing, which began in the fall of 2018. I cannot say enough good things about the Community Council's organizational process for studying difficult problems that the Valley faces and setting about to make real and meaningful changes for the greater good. The affordable housing study was composed of roughly 40 people from all areas of interest and expertise in housing in the Walla Walla, College Place, Dayton, and Milton-Freewater. Many in this group had no expertise or knowledge on the topic, but we had a shared concern. We met weekly for 26 weeks to hear from people and organizations that have knowledge of available housing services. We heard from city leaders that worked on regulatory solutions, organizations that provided housing assistance, experts in banking and the financial sector, realtors, as well as representative of other communities in Washington and Oregon that have found workable solutions to affordable housing challenges. We worked as a group to learn about housing in a very general sense and what the problem here is specifically. We learned about the cost burden that so many people living in our region bear when it comes to housing expenses. I believe that I speak for many of us who joined the group with no expertise in the field of housing when I say that the data we were given was a real eye-opener. We learned that people we know, work alongside, and interact with every day have very few options when it comes to how much they spend on their housing. And they have limited prospects for getting out of the cycle of spending greater than 40 to 50% of their income on housing. The cost burden leaves little flexibility on how the rest of their incomes will be spent. The prospect of owning a home can be too far out of reach for far too many in our community. At the end of the Community Council study, we worked on formulating conclusions which resulted in 28 recommendations, which included the creation of the Community Land Trust for housing. In June of 2019, the Walla Walla County Council on Housing held a community summit, which formed the Community Land Trust Task Force. We heard from leaders from community land trusts throughout Washington, learning what strategies worked and the benefits they made to their communities. Many of the communities that have started CLTs share similarities with our region, communities that are attractive to people from outside the area that want to live in a charming town with access to the outdoors and a slower pace, less traffic, and friendly people. It became increasingly difficult for the people who staff a vital workforce in those communities and residents who've retired in their hometown on fixed incomes to find homes that they could afford. The CLT task force met every 2 weeks from June to October of 2019, and we brought our findings and recommendations to the Walla Walla County Council on Housing, which subsequently included a recommendation for the creation of a CLT in its 5-year housing plan. At the same time, Community Council began convening volunteers to advocate for affordable housing studies recommendations. Community Council's Affordable Housing Implementation Task Force members combined forces with the Walla Walla County CLT Task Force to establish a community land trust. Blue Mountain Action Council agreed to be the fiscal sponsor for the initiative, while Community Council supported the volunteers in their work to establish the CLT. Working together, volunteers then decided to name the CLT Common Roots Housing Trust. The task force has been moving forward over the past year and has garnered support from private and public institutions in the form of grants and is receiving technical assistance in organizational development from Northwest Cooperative Development Center. We've hired a grant writer and Julie Brenner, who you just heard from earlier, and they are helping us to get Common Roots on its feet. Together, we have worked on the foundations on which Common Roots Housing Trust will be built. As we continue to work together to develop Common Roots Housing Trust, we envision that we will both build and renovate houses in order to create a supply of permanently affordable homes. Common Roots will value safe homes that are well-built, energy efficient, and accessible in terms of different abilities and the proximity to community resources. Although Common Roots will build homes, Common Roots is also interested in purchasing and renovating existing homes that are not currently occupied or are uninhabitable. This would lower the cost of homes as they would already have existing infrastructure and utility connections. Common Roots may also purchase the land of qualifying existing homeowners so they can stay in their homes by reducing the cost of homeownership. This way, the land on which they live would be added to the Common Roots portfolio. Common Roots homes will remain permanently affordable, including for all subsequent home buyers. The Common Roots' primary goal is to assist people to purchase homes they could not otherwise afford if they had to purchase the land. We also consider including rental properties, especially if the need is high for that type of home. Common Roots will grow sustainably and according to the community's needs, and will have governance that is responsive to and reflective of the community. Common Roots residents will elect their board representatives, creating opportunities for participation and ensuring that all residents' voices are heard. I have the privilege of living in the home that my parents built for our family. It is humbling that I have a very real sense of home. It is hard to define what having a home means, but we know it when we feel it. It's more than just a secure feeling. It's the freedom to do as we please with my home, to not worry that I will have to move if my landlord chooses or that the monthly cost could go up every year. I can have my pets here. I can paint my walls whatever color I choose. I vote from this home. I pay taxes from this home. And I feel empowered to speak up about how my taxes are spent. I'm part of a neighborhood and I care about those around me. These are just some of the things that owning a home means to me, and I wish that for others as well. We want engaged community members. I want the grocery clerk to be able to attend his child's soccer games, not drive an hour to get home. I want people at home raising children, not working a second job so they can keep their children clothed and fed. I want my grandchildren's teacher to be able to live and retire in comfort. If we are to maintain vibrant communities, we need community members to be able to participate in our economy and civic life. I'm so pleased to see that there are so many people here tonight who were interested in lending their support for this important new project and in finding solutions to the lack of affordable homes in our region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nadine. So next, we'll hear from Amanda Trejo Perez, who is an outreach neighborhood organizer for Commitment to Community program at Blue Mountain Action Council, or BMAC. As an organizer, she helps connect local residents to state agencies and resources.
Hi, thank you. I hope everyone's having a good evening and awesome information. Thank you, Julie and Nadine and Community Council for inviting me to speak with you today. So I just wanted to share a couple of stories of my experience in working with the community and some of the families that we've been working with. Early last year, January 2020, Poverty in Action Project program contacted Commitment to Community to do a listening session with some of our local residents. From that meeting, this group found out that our local residents that we work with have a need to be represented at a higher level. And so they were invited to go and lobby at Olympia. They were able to provide transportation, hotel, dinner, and lunch for them. We had never done anything like this before, and my coworker Delia and I were able to organize the whole trip with Poverty in Action. We took 19 community members or local residents to lobby in Olympia. They had never done this before, and we were able to go. When they were preparing for this, they didn't know what they were going to go lobby for. They didn't know what lobbying was. We did give them a short orientation, and we had them decide what topic they wanted to go and lobby about or for. They had a hard time choosing what they were going to talk about. And it wasn't until one of our neighbors said, you know, I've been living in the same house for 20 years and I've been paying rent. And just recently I was contacted by the homeowners that they wanted to take the house back. And she said, I could have paid that house off if I would have been able to get a loan. And when she shared that story with her other neighbors, it cost her, they were all able to relate to that. And they started talking about housing and how they haven't been able to get home loans because of their income that they earned. And so that's when they decided to go to Olympia and lobby for affordable housing. They were able to talk to all three of our reps up there with Bill Jenkins, Skylar Rood, and Maureen Wash, and to see what it was that they could do to bring more affordable housing programs for Walla Walla County, because that's a huge need. While we were there, I had the group of the youngest. There were a couple of teenagers that came with us, and we met with Skylar Rood. And one of the girls pointed out to him that her mom was able to get a house loan, but the house that she lived in was pretty much falling apart. So the house was affordable, but there was still money being put into this house because of updates that they needed to do to the house. So the family was still in debt, trying to keep the house up so that they could keep it safe and updated, so that the kids can have a house that's still standing as they're growing up. I grew up in the Valley in my grandparents' house that they purchased 30 years ago for $10,000 out on Cherry Street, and it's actually still there. My grandma still lives there. But growing up there, I was there for 17 years. That house had an emotional grip in me growing up. I did not know that it was there, but as kids, we don't see it. We're too busy playing with our neighbors, riding our bikes around the neighborhood. But we're also building stronger bonds with our family members when we have a permanent home. You know, we're We're there building memories, and we're comfortable because we know that we can be as loud as we want to be. Like Nadine said, we can color and paint the walls and decorate it however we want. This hold that this emotional grip that we have on homes, we don't realize that it's there until we reach adulthood. Once we get there, we realize how important it is to have that permanent home to share with our own children and then our grandchildren. Being able to own a home provides that security that a lot of our families are wanting and looking for, that safety. It's a safety net. It's an investment for them. And it's definitely a huge need in our community. I wish I could share more with you. I have so much more to share with you, but this is all I have for you. If you would like to hear more about how we work with our families and connect them with other resources to help them with that, reach out to Commitment to Community. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amanda. So next, we're going to hear from Jenny Dickinson. Jenny is the Executive Director of the Port of Columbia, which coordinates economic development for Columbia County.
Hi everyone, thank you. I sure have learned a lot already this evening. So I'm going to tell you just a little bit about Columbia County and kind of what I've seen here over my last couple of decades working in this industry. We've undergone some, what I would call economic structural changes here. In the early 1900s, 1934 is when the Blue Mountain Cannery first came to town. And agriculture, of course, was big. And we've lost residents and businesses and many other, seen other effects to our community in the mechanization of agriculture, and now the loss of the food processing industry. In 2005, General Mills moved their cannery there, to Peru. And that was 45 full-time high-wage jobs and 900 seasonal jobs, which were mostly migrant workers. In 2001, Columbia Cutstock, which was a wood products manufacturing business, closed. That was the recession before this one, and 40 jobs were lost. At the same time, wind energy was being developed in Columbia County. So while our community was very frightened during the time of Seneca or General Mills closure, we had this new industry coming to town. We now have 4 wind farms in Columbia County, and between all of the companies that own them or provide maintenance, there are 50 very good living wage jobs here now. Seneca, which had been the cannery that canned the General Mills and Green Giant products, they expanded their seed business. Very surprising. And they now have 50 full-time and seasonal employees, good paying jobs. And then in 2019, Columbia Pulp, which is the new company that takes wheat straw and turns it into pulp for paper manufacturing, opened their new facility. And that was 100 new jobs. And when you think about Columbia County's unemployment rate, usually we had about 100 people unemployed in the county. So this has created a lot of exciting job pressure in our community. The ag sector remains important, but as I said, employment is really at historic lows because of mechanization. And you'll see on my next slide, I think it's the next one, where wages are, because it's a little further down. So this is tracking our unemployment rate since 1990. And as you can see, we used to hover in the very high teens, mid-teens in unemployment rate. And as development occurred here, it started to go down. And then you can see in this jump here is the last recession, but you can see that that was about the time the wind farms were coming on board. And our unemployment rate now matches the state and the US instead of being 6 or 7 or 8 percentage points higher than that. And this is a chart that shows wages. So our wages, right about that same time, this is when the wind industry started building here. Our wages went up and much closely mirror the state and federal wages. This chart, however, shows what those wages are. And you can see utilities, this is the wind industry. This is the largest paying industry in our community. But look at ag. Look how low those wages are. And actually our #1 employer here is our hospital district. And look at the average wages there. So much of, that isn't all the jobs, but you know, so many of the jobs that support a system like that just don't pay enough. And our poverty rate, it has gone down, it was lower back then, but it went up for a while and then it's coming back down now. Although the COVID pandemic is, I'm afraid, probably going to cause that to go back up because a lot of people are suffering. So what does this all mean? So through all these trials and tribulations, we've ended up in a better spot economically. We have new jobs, we do have higher wages, and we have a much healthier tax base. New people are moving here, partly for the new jobs and partly by commuters looking to find more affordable housing. We have a lot of people that live in Dayton and work in Walla Walla and even in the Tri-Cities. So this has created more pressure for housing here. And the prices of both rentals and homes for sale have gone up much faster than wages have. I'm curious to see what our numbers now are as well, because similar to Walla Walla, the pandemic does not seem to have affected home prices. In fact, they've gone up even more. We've talked to developers in the past, and the cost of land and new construction makes it difficult to develop affordable housing. And developers are not really very interested in small communities. They're looking for a way to make a little easier money on building a lot of houses. So what we need is what I call workforce housing. So our current inventory is a very limited mix of housing. We have many beautiful historic homes, but we have many historic homes that are not in very good shape. We have a fair amount of housing that was built with what I would call substandard construction, temporary structures. Part of that workforce growth when the Blue Mountain Cannery first came in the 1930s, a lot of houses were built. Some of them were built for seasonal workers. They weren't built to house people year round. And they're still here in our community and they're not in very good shape. We have very little multifamily housing, apartments in particular. The ones that we have are rarely vacant. And we don't have very many more modern style homes, which some people are looking for. We also do not have adequate housing for seniors in transition. This is the last picture. This is a rental house that my husband and I own. And I just wanted to show this as an example of a beautiful historic home, but it's on a tiny lot with no garage. And that is so typical of the homes in Dayton, the historic homes. Even if they had a garage, it was usually a carriage house built for the carriage. So just this one's in good shape, but it's kind of an example of some of the homes that don't necessarily fit what the families that want to move to town and work in our industries are looking for. This, Julie's numbers are way better than mine, but this was one chart that I found recently from the Employment Security Department that showed how many residents in Columbia County are paying 35% or more of their household income on housing. And you can see we're actually in better shape than the state and the US, but it's still a pretty high number, 25%. It's a pretty high number. So anyway, that my 2 cents is that we need more housing in Columbia County, and we need to figure out a way to do it, and in particular, workforce housing. Housing for people that have jobs and need a place to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Jenny. So next, we'll hear from Laura Prado. She's the Client Services Manager with Park Resources, which serves rural Western communities. Laura also serves as a volunteer on Community Council's Affordable Housing Implementation Task Force and was on the Affordable Housing Study Committee.
Helps if I remember to unmute my mic. Thank you very much for the introduction, and I'm so pleased to see that we have so many active participants and so many other great panelists tonight. I'm glad to have the chance to speak with you today. As Lily said, I have the pleasure to work on the Affordable Housing Study Committee, and I remember hearing about the concept of a community land trust for the first time. It seemed like such an interesting and feasible solution to one of the many challenges for housing in the Walla Walla Valley. The difficulty in purchasing a home is particularly challenging for low-income and first-time home buyers. This issue is both personal and relevant to me because I have dealt with many of the struggles that first-time home buyers face. With that in mind, I wanted to share a little of my story and how I think a community land trust would have helped my husband and I. For us, the biggest challenge was affordability, as well as coming up with the down payment and the cost of the land. And to clarify, when I say affordability, I do not mean a large family home. I mean a starter home, 1 or 2 bedrooms with a mortgage that fit within our monthly budget. Trying to find a home that was both in good condition and within our price range was a challenge. It seems that the only homes in our price range were ones that needed a lot of work, and by the time we invested that money, it put us out of budget anyway. Our second problem was coming up with the down payment. There are some options, such as through the USDA, that require no down payment, but the homes that would qualify for those were still out of our price range. We also looked at buying land and installing a manufactured home, which was recommended to us as being a more affordable option. But finding land was challenging, and because of the scarcity, the land that we did find was really expensive. We ultimately took another path to home ownership and are planning to buy a home within the year, but it took us about 7 years to reach this point. In the meantime, we put everything else aside, including starting a family, going on vacation, and even delaying healthcare to reach our goals. I'm not sharing this with you because I think that I'm unique. I'm sharing it because I'm not, and that's the problem. I have friends, family, former classmates, and even some of my clients who have shared similar stories, not only in the Walla Walla Valley, but across the Northwest. But what's special about the Walla Walla Valley is our local leadership and volunteers and the community council, which has brought all of us together to proactively address these problems. I believe that one of the best and most affordable or best solutions to affordable housing is the community land trust, which will provide a steady stock of affordable homes that can get homeowners started so that they have the chance to build equity and reach their own personal financial goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Laura. So our final speaker tonight will be Chad Hickox, the president of the Walla Walla Community College. President Hickox is also on the board of the Walla Walla Valley Chamber of Commerce and is an active member of the Education Attainment Alliance.
Thank you, Lily. Good evening, everyone. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm going to keep my comments very brief because I know we need to leave some time for questions and answers. So I have 3 main points that I would like to make, and a couple of them have already been made very well and much more eloquently than I will this evening. But to amplify those messages, I believe that affordable housing and the lack of availability of affordable housing in our area is a drain on our ability to engage in regional economic development. We see that in lots of different conversations that I'm party to. So I'm glad that that's being discussed. I also would like to share, my second point is to share some information with you about how homelessness and housing insecurity affects students at Walla Walla Community College. We've had the opportunity over the last year or more to do a couple of different surveys. And without getting into too many details, there were a few data points that I wanted to pull out just for your information. The most comprehensive survey that we've done recently happened just prior to the pandemic. And during that time, we found that 59% of our students had experienced housing insecurity within the previous 12 months. That was 59%. And 19% had been homeless within the previous 12 months. So I wanted to break that down very briefly for you. Of the 59% who were housing insecure, 26% had their rent or mortgage increase make it hard to pay within the last 12 months. 23% had skipped or the full amount of a rent or mortgage payment during the previous 12 months. 22% did not pay their full utilities bills. 19% were in an account default or in collections. 14% had moved in with others due to financial burdens. 10% lived with others in houses that were beyond the house's capacity, so they were crowded in small houses. 7% left their house because they felt unsafe, and 4% had to move 3 or more times within the previous year because of their housing insecurity. So this is a problem for 59% of the students at Walla Walla Community College during the time covered by this survey. There's no reason to believe that it's gotten any better during the pandemic. And it's a constant struggle that our students experience. So it's not only our students either, though. We do occasionally hear from highly professional employees that housing is difficult to procure here on a professional salary. And it does make it difficult for us to keep a stable workforce on occasion. So nothing that you haven't heard, but just attach a few numbers to the community college's perspective on this. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much for that information, Chad. So that concludes the speaker portion, and we'll move into question and answer. So thank you again to all of our wonderful speakers. As we move into Q&A, I want to introduce Rachel Elfenbein and Catherine Beninga. Rachel is the Advocacy Coordinator for Community Council and is managing this volunteer effort to establish Common Roots. And Catherine is Community Council's Study Coordinator and was responsible for facilitating the Affordable Housing Study Report. So I'll ask the panelists the questions, including questions that people asked when they signed up for the town hall. We'll try to answer as many questions as we can. For the audience members, if your question doesn't get answered, feel free to reach out to us after the town hall. And for our speakers, as you answer these questions, please keep time in mind. So the first question goes to Rachel, kind of a softball. Will a recording of this presentation be made available, and can it be accessed later?
Hi everyone, good evening. Yes, we are currently recording this presentation so that folks who weren't able to attend tonight can listen in at a later point, and folks who are here can also listen in on a later point. And hopefully we'll have it up on our website as soon as we can get that done.
Thank you so much. Our next question is for Julie. So Julie, do CLTs require homeowners to maintain the homes to a certain quality through reinvestment in their homes, like new roofing, new painting, and general maintenance? And how does the CLT make sure that the homes are kept up? If they buy a new roof for $7,500, for example, do they get that back?
Yeah, so as I said, that's part of our emphasis on stewardship. So we have a couple checks and balances, and each organization does this a little bit different. But first of all, the lease says that, you know, we are delivering a quality home to that first home buyer, whether it's a home we purchased and renovated, whether it's something that we built ourselves. It's a quality home. It's inspected before it's sold. And so we expect each homeowner to take care of their home and pass that on to the next homeowner. We enforce that through the lease. So there's a provision in there that says before you sell your home, the buyer gets an inspection and you have to fix anything that's broken. So, you know, if it says you need to paint in 2 years, that's not broken. But if it says, you know, if there's any health or safety issues or anything's actually wrong with the house, you have to, as the owner, you have to fix that before you can sell the home. So that's one piece of it. The next piece is some of us have what we call long-term maintenance reserves built into a monthly fee that we charge. And so Opal, for example, collects $50 a month that's attached to each building. So that fund accrues over homeowners. And the idea there was that 3 homeowners may consume a roof over 25 years, but only 1 homeowner gets stuck replacing it. So we wanted to make sure there were some financial resources to make that easier for that 1 homeowner who gets stuck with it. And then finally, some groups like Colson Community Land Trust, who has a portfolio of 75-year-old homes across Bellingham, had to think of some way to address those larger capital investments of an aging housing stock. So while they did the things that they needed to do when they bought the homes into their portfolio, you still might need to replace, like you said, the HVAC or something like that. And so they have what they call an added value policy onto their resale restrictions. So there's the normal math of what you can sell your house for, and then certain items might qualify for reimbursement when you sell. So we try to address it from a bunch of different angles, but the short answer is yes, the fact that the homes are well maintained is really important to us. And we try to balance who's responsible for those, but ultimately it's the seller in most cases, with the exception of those large capital things that may be shared between a seller and a buyer or offset in some other way.
Excellent, thank you, Julie. One more question for Julie. What role do local units of government play in the development of the trust?
So for most of us, that really varies widely. I was invited by the city of Chelan, for example, to come and help them launch a community land trust effort in their community. And it was the city who initiated it. Now, Community Land Trust is a nonprofit organization. So although they initiated the investigation into it, they don't own or have any particular authority over the community land trust. But we do hope that they're going to be funding partners. And sometimes that means grants directly to the community land trust for that subsidy number. Sometimes that means discounted permitting. Sometimes it means expedited permitting. Sometimes it means land donations from a municipality to a community land trust for the purpose of affordable housing. So there's all different ways that we partner with our local governments.
Thank you. Julie, another question for you. Does an individual's credit score affect their ability to purchase a house in a community land trust? Will individuals who want to purchase a home need a down payment? What percentage and what type of lenders are involved, and is the loan process different?
So I personally spend a lot of time making sure that we have several different lending partners at the table so that our homeowners have options. So most of our buyers don't, everyone has to have some cash in order to purchase their house, but most of the time that goes towards closing costs and not towards a down payment. Sometimes people even borrow some of the money for the closing costs. So their original debt might be slightly higher than the purchase price. So there is some cash necessary, but it's generally in the $1,000 to $3,000 to $4,000 range, not the $10,000 to $20,000 to $30,000 range. So that's the down payment question. Our homeowners do, though, have to be able to get a mortgage or financing of some nature. So People with low credit scores. I've worked with some people who came into my office one day. We pulled the credit report for them. I told them what they had to do to fix it. They walk out in tears, but then 5 years later, they walk back in and say, I did everything you told me to, and I'm ready to buy a house. So, you know, we do work with people over the long term to get in a position so that they are able to purchase a home. And we also can work with people who don't have any credit score. So I always tell people, you know, this myth that you sort of needed to have credit of some kind is less true these days, because most banks will work with what they call alternative credit, which is, do you pay your electric bill on time? Do you pay your cell phone bill on time? I'd even use Netflix and things like that to document people's credit worthiness. And because we have like a standardized lease that we use across the country with community land trusts everywhere, that's been endorsed by both Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac. And so we are able to get access to most conventional types of financing.
Excellent, thank you. So Julie, who gets to buy a Common Roots home? As in, look, what do you have to do to qualify, but also who qualifies as a member of a CLT and has voting rights?
So community land trusts will all define their membership rules a little bit differently. Most of the time it's that you live or work within a particular geographic region, and that's often, and you pay a membership fee, and it's usually, you know, very nominal, but you choose membership basically. So there's no test or whatever to be a member, but that's the broader tent of everybody who kind of supports this vision in your community. But the actual people who live in community land trust homes are people who've applied. They're income eligible, so that means their income is below a certain threshold. They've been through some counseling so that they understand what they're getting into, and they understand that they're buying a house and not the land, and there's restrictions and all of that. And then they also have been through some counseling so they understand the lending process and are likely to be able to get financing. We do also often, though, you know, people who are divorced might have $150,000 from their last house that they can invest, but maybe they only earn $25,000 a year, so they're not in a position to buy a $250,000 house and get a mortgage on it or whatever. So there are, people can buy with cash in most cases too, but there's eligibility criteria. And new groups often spend a lot of time talking about their lotteries and how they're going to choose who gets to buy their homes. And I generally tell folks to not worry as much about that. You'll be lucky in your first neighborhood if you have a line out the door, because while this is a wonderful opportunity, it's also a new idea in your community, and it takes a while to catch on. So at Opal, I've got a long waiting list. We don't have to, I don't have to advertise in the MLS. I don't have to do any of that, because we have people backed up for 2 to 3 years to purchase homes. But the first time out the gate, it's a little bit harder. And then different groups have different priorities. Some will do a lottery kind of system. We do like a first come, first serve. So the date you apply is the date that's stamped on your application, and all other things being equal, we work through people in order.
Okay, thank you. This next question is for Rachel. Who is organizing Common Roots Housing Trust, and who is funding it? And how will decisions be made, and by whom?
Okay, so right now we have a partnership. Lily, who's spoken, and Nadine, who've also spoken, are volunteers on our Affordable Housing Implementation Task Force, the volunteer committee that's working to make Common Roots Housing Trust a reality. And then Catherine and I staff the initiative, and we're also partnering with BMAC, Blue Mountain Action Council, which is currently serving as the fiscal sponsor of this initiative. So we're all working together to make Common Roots Housing Trust a reality. I think I might have missed part. There was 3 parts to that question. Is there something I missed?
Yeah. There was a question about who's funding it, and then how will decisions be made and by whom?
Mm-hmm. So right now, with the Affordable Housing Implementation Task Force, we're making decisions together. What we're hoping to transition to is a foundational board sometime this year, and we don't have an exact date on that yet. And we're going to pursue the structure that Julie talked about, that tripartite structure where we have 1/3 residents on the board, and in this case, it would be future potential residents. And then we're looking for 1/3 public sector representation and 1/3 private sector representation on that foundational board. We're also in the process of applying for funding to find a full-time staff person to staff Common Roots Housing Trust and really get it off the ground. In the meantime, we have received several small grants, both from public sector and private sector funders. And like I said, continuing to apply for grants to fund Common Roots. And we're looking to expand our funding base as well and looking to go after big grants to fund staffing and also large grants to fund property acquisition and development.
Excellent, thanks. Our next question is for Julie. How do you make sure that these homes will go to people who need them, low-income people, and not get passed down over generations, even when someone has accrued significant wealth? Do people have to sell the home if they start to make a lot of money?
So that's a great question. First of all, we do the income qualification. So when the first person comes to buy a house or the first time a house is sold or every time a house is sold, we go through, evaluate people's income, evaluate their assets and determine whether they're eligible or not. Once you own your home, I used to say, you can win the lottery and keep your Opal home. And then somebody won $3 million who owned one of our homes. And surprise, they sold their Opal home because they didn't want to have their Opal home anymore now that they had $3 million. So, but she could have kept her home. And that's really important to us because that's one of those tenets of home ownership, like getting a dog and painting it any color you want. The fact that you don't have to move anymore ever again if you choose. Is really foundational to home ownership, and we want to protect people's right there. So we don't ask about your income once you purchased your home. We just ask you about your income while you're purchasing your home. So that's part of it. And then in terms of inheritance, what the master or the model ground lease says is that you can leave your home to anybody you want. It can be your cousin, it can be whoever actually, and Opal has had a few of our homeowners leave their homes to us now. So they kind of pass it back and then we sell it again and get that money to make another home affordable. So that's been kind of lovely. But people can leave their home to whomever they want. But if it's not their child, their spouse, or someone who's been living with them, then that person either has to be income eligible or they have to sell the house and they get the proceeds of the sale. So if it is a child, a spouse, or someone who's been living there, they don't have to be income eligible and they can inherit the home. And that's been pretty, I want to say that, people often have this idea that their children want their houses, but in fact, we've had, unfortunately, we've been around almost 30 years, people do die, and we've had several homes transition in that way, and we've yet to have someone's child decide to keep it. And we have had 2 now grandchildren working towards that, but they're income eligible like they would have to be because they haven't, they're not one of those classes of people, a child, a spouse, or someone living there.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is for Rachel. Actually, it's sort of a combination of questions. We've gotten a lot of questions from folks who are interested in supporting this effort. So the question is, how can individuals and community organizations get involved?
Yeah, well, thank you for your interest in supporting Common Roots. So after the webinar tonight, I would encourage you to get in touch with me. There's different ways to get involved, and so I would rather kind of talk to everyone individually or as an organization and see how you're interested in getting involved. One potential avenue, of course, that I talked about is joining the board, and we're looking for board members. But there are other ways to get involved and support this initiative. So when the webinar ends tonight, we'll provide contact information so that you can reach out and contact us and talk to us about how you would like to get involved and contribute to this effort.
Excellent, thank you. Julie, what size of land parcels are eligible to be put into the trust? Can the land be anywhere, or does it need to be in a specific location? And how did Orcas Island get its initial capital?
So any size lot or land is fine. So Opal just bought 30 acres. That was a really big acquisition for us. It's very exciting. It'll keep us busy for a long time. And we've been donated tiny little lots where we can put one little 800 square foot house on it. So everywhere in between, as long as it's really about, you know, what the land use regulations afford and feasibility in terms of what can you do with that land and can you produce something for a reasonable cost. So there isn't any limitations on what parcel of land. Most community land trusts have their geographic area defined in their organizing documents. So you know, the service area will be dictated. So the land needs to be within your service area, but that's really the only limitation. And Opal, this always kind of blows me away a little bit, but our first project, the first people moved into their Opal homes in 1994. And at that point, it took $4,444 of subsidy to make those homes affordable. And if we didn't have them resale restricted, it would take $144,000 to make them affordable today. But that little $4,000 investment did it back then. So eventually, your $127,000 investment will sound so tiny compared to what it will take in the future to create affordable homes. But we started with CDBG funding, which is HUD funding that comes through the state. And we've used everything from, we do a lot of private fundraising. We just purchased that 30-acre parcel with 100% private local donations that we solicited. So everything from the State Housing Trust Fund to HUD funding to grants from foundations, local residents who want to invest in what we do.
Okay. Next question is for Rachel. Who is looking for available land? Who will provide funding to buy it? Can local landowners donate land? And does Common Roots currently have land that they can develop on?
Thank you, great questions. Currently, we do not have any land to develop on. As Julie just mentioned, there's different ways, different types of streams of funding that we could use to acquire land. Certainly someone could donate land. They wanted to donate land to Common Roots. One of the avenues that we're looking at for acquiring land is the gifting of land from local governments, surplus public land that they might have. I believe that Washington state law allows for that, for local governments to gift surplus public land for affordable housing. So we've been kind of in preliminary discussions with local governments about that potential, and we're hoping to pursue that. And then we could have private donors as well who could donate land.
Okay, thank you. And we'll have one more in a second. This one is for Rachel as well. So when will all this happen? When will people be able to buy homes in the CLT? And is there a waiting list?
So we don't have a waiting list at this point. Yeah, and so we, like I said, we've won several small grants and they're starting to build up Common Roots, and we wanted to introduce Common Roots to the community tonight and to build up support for Common Roots. We're hoping within the next year to apply for grant funding to acquire our first home, but I can't give an exact timeline on that just yet because it is all grant dependent. Right now, we do not have the money for that property acquisition and development, but we're hoping within the next year to be raising that money.
Okay, thanks. So we had a lot of other questions that we couldn't get to. And at the end, I have a few words to say, and then I'll give our email address so that people can contact us. I want to thank our audience so much for your questions, and thank our panelists for helping us to better understand how Common Roots will provide permanently affordable homes to residents of our region. So as you've heard, Common Roots Housing Trust is a new organization, and we are in the early stages of development. Common Roots is being built on a foundation of community engagement and participation. With support from a wide range of community members, stakeholders, and institutions, we're confident that Common Roots will be able to provide permanently affordable homes to residents of our region. So if you are potentially interested in living in a Common Roots home, please reach out to us. And if you are potentially interested in volunteering to help develop Common Roots, please reach out to us. And if you are interested in donating to Common Roots, please reach out to us. Our email address is info@commonrootshousing.org. To find out more about Common Roots, you can also visit our website. That's commonrootshousing.org. Did I already say that? Nope. Okay. You can also find us on Facebook. So again, I want to thank you so much for participating in tonight's town hall, and we look forward to being in touch with you as Common Roots develops into a vital community asset. Thank you and good night.